Hi, and welcome back to Where Truth is Valued. I'm your host, Abisoye. And if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Here we explore complex topics and focus on critical thinking and open conversations. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring the challenging questions around class, culture, and identity in the UK. Now, this topic is deeply personal, especially for those of us from Black or Brown or Asian communities. So we're going to be talking about patriotism, nationalism, and understanding the roots of anger in the society. This episode will also cover assimilation and that big question, who is England for anymore? As always, this is a space where we learn together, and to help us dig into these topics, I had a conversation with Fahima Mahomed, who is a Muslim broadcaster and neuroscientist, and she brings a wealth of insight to the table. Okay, so let's start with patriotism. On the surface, it's about a love for your country, a feeling that many of us can relate to. But in the context of Britain, patriotism has layers that are tied to a history of imperialism and colonialism. And there's an argument that trying to make patriotism inclusive might be more complicated than it seems because it's so deeply rooted in these histories. Fahima and I talked about patriotism and what it means today, and how it can sometimes exclude rather than include.
Patriotism is, being proud of, the place that you live and respecting its cultures, values, and laws, but at the same time, without losing your identity. And a lot of people think that you can or you have to, especially in the UK, identify as one. But I think you can have multiple identities. I'm British, I'm Muslim. I was born and raised in South Africa. I am also, carrying so many different identities in one with respect to the law of the land. And it does not take away from the other. There's so many people now with diverse backgrounds and multiculturalism within even a family and a unit. So I think people need to understand that patriotism can come from all kinds of backgrounds and walks of life without taking away their personal identity. I am patriotic. I am. And the thing is, if I stand up to speak even against certain things, it's because I feel it doesn't fall in line with the British values and the laws, especially when it comes to equality and things like that. So people need to understand. But obviously, when people look at you, they judge you and they think that you're just coming from a place where it's just, trying to enforce my own beliefs. It is not like that at all. I'm actually enforcing the belief of the law of the land and the country itself.
Fahima offers a perspective on patriotism that is inclusive, but she also touches on the darker side, which is nationalism in Britain. Nationalism often masquerades itself as patriotism, but it can be such a massive cover for more exclusionary, even supremacist ideologies. So this really made me think, is it possible to separate patriotism from these underlying issues, or are they inherently tied to them? It's something worth really thinking about as we consider what it really means to love your country. Now, let's move on to nationalism. This is often seen as a more intense version of patriotism, but it's also seen as a very powerful political tool. Some people argue that nationalism has been used by those in power to divert attention away from systematic issues like economic inequality, instead focusing on a somewhat fabricated sense of national identity. Fahima shared some of her thoughts with me on how nationalism can be divisive, particularly when it's used to create an us versus them mentality.
Nationalism for Britain, in a lot of people is like, it should be white English speaking or white English people in certain top jobs or whatever. But we are in a country in the UK which is predominantly white, and they have got the equal opportunities like everyone else. And if anything, the people that do come here from another foreign country, they work much harder. They are probably even more skilled. They do speak several languages, including English. It's not the facts that are being put out there. It's the propaganda of certain individuals to incite this kind of division. And we've seen this over history. And we've seen this because there's a different agenda beyond what we're seeing right now for this division. And it's not the problem of the people that are at the bottom and everyday working class. It's the elite that are the issue and the problem that's creating. And if we were to be smart enough to actually understand what is really going on, then we will realize that there is no real division between us. We are all one race trying to do the same thing for our families, communities, and live here. And it doesn't mean that we can't have diversity and differences. And that's what makes it so amazing, because we all enjoy each other's differences in so many ways, whether it's the culture, the food, the different languages, the different looks that we bring to the entire environment. And that's a healthy look, if you think about it.
I found Fahima's perspective so intriguing because it highlighted to me how nationalism can be used by the elite to maintain their power by keeping people divided. Which then makes me think that it's not just about loving your country, it's about who benefits from that love and who gets left out. It definitely makes me wonder, makes me think, how often are we being told stories that keep us angry at the wrong things? And how can we start focusing that energy on the real problems? Fahima also mentioned that these divisions aren't random. They're created by those in power for a reason. Maybe the key to moving past all these divisions is to focus on what is really important. Maybe we should start paying attention to what really matters, making sure that everyone gets a fair shot in life and is treated with respect. It really is about treating others how you would like to be treated. You're in this position, you are in this life, you are in this family, and you could have been in another family, you could have been in another situation. But I don't necessarily believe in luck, but your situation could be different, could be completely different. So I do think it is around treating people how you would want to be treated. Brexit was a turning point for the UK, and it brought a lot of underlying tensions to the surface. One of the big issues was immigration, and not just the way that it was talked about, but the fact that it focused on the fear of foreigners. There was a real complex narrative at play, and immigration was framed in a way that made it seem like the main problem, distracting from other important issues. Fahima had a strong take on the contributions of immigrants, which were often ignored during the Brexit discussions.
If you talk to any sort of like economist, they will tell you how much contributions are being put by, the immigrants. You strike for an entire day and tell all the immigrants to stop working, and you'll see how this country will not be able to function. We need to put it into perspective. I think that there are real conversations that need to be had out there, but it really does start with government and policy, and to enforce it and not diversify and have people that are, not really understanding what the real issues are, and making them go out in the streets and destroy and causing more issues and unnecessary costs to, again, it's the councils, it's the communities, it's the taxes that's going to be paying for it, when actually we can be having such, genuine debate and actually addressing the issues.
I think without a shadow of a doubt, immigrants are essential to the UK, which should challenge these simple stories that have been pushed by certain political agendas during Brexit and beyond. Now let's dive into the assimilation versus integration debate that has come up a lot. To clarify, assimilation means that an immigrant is expected to give up parts, or if not all, of their own culture and fully adopt the culture of the country they've moved to. Integration, on the other hand, is about finding a way to participate in society while still keeping your own cultural identity. There's a lot of pressure on immigrants to assimilate rather than to integrate. But something that Fahima mentioned, which I found very interesting, is that when a lot of British people, when they move abroad, they often don't assimilate into local cultures. Instead, they tend to live in expat communities, keeping their own customs, and might not even learn the local language, which seems to me like a double standard.
Maybe the British should think about that as well when they go out to other countries and learn what it is to be integrated. Because if you go certain parts of Spain, you think you are in London, for example, there's shops, their food, the way in which they're all looking dressed all in one area, and they're serving English meals and drinking their alcohol, whatever it is, and also behaving in a rowdy way, which a lot of people are complaining about. So that means I need to assimilate and carry on like that. No, thank you. At the end of the day, I'm going to be true to myself, but at the same time with respect of the law of the land. That's all it needs to be. And the law of the land does not take away my culture, my identity, my faith, and I can still integrate. And I think people need to understand that. You can't, basically criticize another country then for being that way if you're doing exactly the same. Integration is, respecting the culture, trying to maybe learn the language. You are part of society. So, you would probably go to, different types of areas, but they always look at it again from one side, whereas, oh, there's groups of, so-called places where there's only a certain community that's there. Then why are, for example, in certain areas that other people are moving out then? Why don't you just keep staying there? And integrate as well. Integration comes from both sides, not just one. So if you're moving out because you don't like your neighbors, then whose fault is that?
I think the point that Fahima is making is really around fairness. Why expect immigrants to fully assimilate, but don't hold British expats to the same standard? It's a reminder that integration should be a two-way street built on respect for all cultures. Now, let's get into that all important question that we had over the last few weeks with the riots that have taken place in the UK. And you know what? I don't even want to just say the last few weeks. I've heard this question for many years, but it's just been very in your face in the last few weeks. And that is, who is England for anymore? Now, it's not just about immigration, it's about who feels they belong in this country. The narrative of belonging has often been shaped by exclusion, and it's crucial to explore who gets to decide what it means to be British today. Fahima offered me, I would say, a very powerful reflection on the diversity of the British identity.
What is English? What is British? It is diversity. It is multiculturalism. You've got that privilege, and this is your country, just like everybody else that comes here, and they make use of the resources. So do the exact same thing and don't shy away from it. And, everyone has a group in a community that has a lower social economic background or higher or whatever. And I live in Surrey, in a very predominantly white area, but, I see in the schools as well, a lot of the children that may even come from Hong Kong or from any ethnic minority background, they'll come hardly speaking English in 6 months. They're still doing much better than the English people. And there's been studies out there to show that people that go into higher education, that actually go and do the skilled work and go and have the highly skilled jobs, are the ones that are coming from outside or a different background, because that's our culture. And I know that it's in the Black community, in the brown community, whichever, the Chinese, from Hong Kong, they've come here and they've actually, made something with the same opportunities as everybody else. Britain's for everyone. And if you're not, taking that advantage or using what resources are out there, then it's not the other to blame. You need to look in the mirror and start from there.
Fahima really challenges the traditional notion of British identity, and it pushes me to think about how inclusive or exclusive our understanding of what it means to be British really is. So, as we wrap up our conversation, let's take a minute to think about how our opinions are shaped, and sometimes without us even realizing it. We're constantly bombarded with information, whether it's through the news, social media, or even just the conversations we have with others. But what we often don't consider is how this information is being presented to us and how it influences our thinking. Across the world, but I'm going to specifically talk about in the UK, we've seen a lot of anger lately, especially in the working class communities. But what is really driving it? This is where behavioral psychology comes in. It's a tool that's used, especially in politics, to subtly influence how we perceive things, reinforcing our existing beliefs or pushing us towards certain viewpoints, like nationalism. It's not just about what we're told, it's also about how we seek out that information. Search engines and social media algorithms can show us more of the same content once we start looking for something, which can unknowingly deepen our biases. As mentioned earlier, Fahima Mahomed is a neuroscientist, so I thought it would be really valuable to get her point of view on how we process information and how it shapes our opinions. Here's what she had to say about being critical of the information we consume and what we search for.
It's all psychology. It's all subliminal messages. It's all a lot of thought into what's being put out there in order for individuals who don't really give it much thought about what they're reading and feeling, just to feel what they already think and believe without sort of, being intellectual and dissecting and filtering information. You can't take away from human behavior and mind and thought. The media plays a big part, social media plays a big part. And of course, if you want to influence individuals, they have to have the right kind of information put out there on the mainstream in order for them to sort of maybe counter their own ideas and think twice about what they're feeling, and also realize that most of it is not fact and truth. And we can look at statistics and also sort of psychological researches and articles. And again, even those can be put out just to give a particular narrative. So being an academic myself, I can say, well, psychology says this, psychology says that, because I just want to influence you. But if you're smart enough, you'll know where that's coming from, and you'll find a counter to that, or you'll actually agree to it from a certain area, a certain part, a certain group. But it does not, we generalize, distort, and delete information as individuals and humans. So we need to take that into consideration when we're speaking.
Fahima's point of view is crucial. In a world where information is so easily shared and spread, taking a moment to think critically about how we find and share information can make all the difference. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Where Truth is Valued. I really do hope today's discussion has given you some new insight, new perspectives to think about. Remember, this is a space where we're all learning together, and your thoughts are always welcome. A huge thank you to Fahima Mahomed for sharing her insights. And if you found this episode thought-provoking, please subscribe, leave a comment, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious and keep valuing the truth.